morning, everyone. My name is Laura Solano, and it is my pleasure to be here today, providing this important information and session to all our students. This morning with our host, our president, Kevin Wasley, wants to say a welcome words to all of you.
Thank you, Laura. I'd say good morning, but I'm not sure it's morning in all of the places where everyone lives. But I want to say welcome to everyone from many locations around the world. Greetings from Nipissing University in beautiful North Bay, Ontario, Canada. My name is Kevin Walmsley, and I am your president and vice chancellor, and very proud to be so. And I want to tell you how excited I am that you are coming to Canada and that you have selected Nipissing University as your destination of choice. So congratulations for that. Now, I know you are all in different situations. Some of you have been waiting to come to Canada. Some of you will be able to arrive in January, and some of you will be waiting for your paperwork to be complete. So this is very difficult for you. I know, trying to be patient with getting permissions, but it's so important that you be patient with that, because what's going to happen here in Canada, I think, is going to make a difference in the rest of your life, and it is worth the wait. And we can't wait for you to arrive. And this team today here on the webinar is going to assist you in the many aspects of transitioning from your home country to Canada and to Nipissing University. So I'm sure you've already been looking at photographs and videos, and you can see how beautiful our campus is. We're in the fall term. The leaves have fallen off the trees. It's still quite warm here, and we'll be waiting for our blanket of snow, which will arrive in the next while, and certainly will be here by January. And so I'm sure that part of that transition is understanding how to dress and live in a Canadian winter, which is really quite beautiful. And the good news is you can always warm up by putting on more clothing. You may not realize it, but there are many people who are excited for your arrival at Nipissing University. Your professors are already preparing for the winter terms, and our staff is preparing to welcome you and to get you situated within your course selections and entry into your programs. And of course, you'll need to talk to our staff about issues like housing and transition, and they are here to assist you in every way possible. So there's lots of variety on the call today, I think. Some of you undergraduate students, some of you in grad programs perhaps, and some of you in post-baccalaureate programs. But regardless of the program that you've chosen, we're very excited that you're coming to see us for those programs. And I want to commend you all for taking up this challenge of leaving your home, your hometowns and your home countries, and to embark on what should be a very, very exciting journey for you. And it takes a lot of courage to take that journey. So I want to congratulate all of you for that. But of course, you're all going to have the benefits of a Nipissing University degree. We're very proud of that, and we think it will do you very well in your future. So as I said, this webinar is designed to assist you with all of your issues in arriving to Canada and to Nipissing University. And I want to thank all of our hosts today for all of their work. And I want to wish you all the best. And I can tell you, whether it's January or September, I can't wait to meet you. And I want you to have safe journeys, and all the best to you. Have a great day. Thank you very much, everyone.
So Elizabeth and Sia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Laura. It's great to meet you all, and it's great to be here as well. Just wanted to do some housekeeping before we start. You'll see on the bottom of your screen, there's a button there called Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, feel free. So Zia and myself, we're going to be talking about immigration law policies that you guys need to be aware of. And we're going to start off with temporary residence. So when you have your study permit, you're going to be a temporary resident. Your status will end at the time of your study permit. So we're going to first talk about what you need to understand as a temporary resident.
Yeah, so to start, that study permit that you receive has conditions on it that are listed on the physical permit itself. So one of the big ones that you definitely do need to take note of is the expiry date. So your study permit on it will have a date that says that this study permit is valid up until this date. Now, if you're still in Canada, you do need to make sure that you keep your status while you're here. And what that means is applying to extend or change your status prior to the expiry of your study permit. Now, as long as you submit a complete application, a complete extension application, prior to that expiry date, you'll hold what's called implied or maintained status while you wait for a decision on that extension application. So let's say you get a study permit, it's not valid for the full duration of your studies, or you still need longer to finish your program. What you need to do is make sure that you submit an extension application for your study permit prior to that expiry date. And that will mean that you're allowed to continue studying in Canada while you're waiting for a decision on that extension application, as long as you remain physically here and as long as you apply properly. So very important to submit a complete and proper application so that you benefit from that implied or maintained status. Now, what happens if you miss that deadline? It does happen. We suddenly pull up the study permit and we realize, oh no, we thought we still had a month left, but unfortunately it did expire a couple weeks ago. And what that means is that now you're out of status, but there is still a period of time after the expiry of your current permit where you can submit what's called a restoration application. So this is for someone who's lost status and is applying to get their status back. Now, the timeline to submit a restoration application is 90 days from the loss of your status. So if you forget to extend your status entirely, that means that you have 90 days from the expiry date that's listed on your study permit. If you submit an extension application, but it's refused, then you have 90 days from that refusal decision to submit your restoration application. Now, the difference with the restoration application is that while you're waiting for a decision on it, you unfortunately can't study or work in Canada. That means that you can be here and wait for a decision, but you won't be able to continue your program until you get a new study permit.
Okay. So another thing that you guys have to be very aware of is in Canada, when we talk about permanent residence, the government makes a big deal about which occupation category the work that you do belongs to. Is it high skilled or is it low skilled? Currently, our system has 5 categories. O, A, and B are high skilled, and C and D are low skilled. But by next week, the government is going to adopt a new system. It's going to be called a tier system, TEER. And instead of 5 categories, they're going to have 6 categories. And so tiers 0 to tier 0, 1, 2, 3 is going to be high skilled, and 5 and 6 are going to 4, 5, and 6 are going to be low skilled, and there's going to be 4 and 5 are going to be low skilled, and there's going to be 3 occupations in the previous one that are no longer going to be high skilled, they're going to be low skilled, but 16 new occupations will be classified as high skilled. So it's going to be a big transition between what the old system was by next week to what the new system is going to be. When you guys are going to be doing your work, you will need to look at the system, the new system, to see whether or not your work is going to be considered high skilled or low skilled. We will be sending out a newsletter for all of the news about immigration, such as this, and other changes. There are so many changes in immigration. It happens all of the time. And so if you've signed up for this webinar, we will automatically just put you on the list for the newsletter to tell you about news about immigration when it comes out. Okay.
Okay, so we talked about some of the conditions that are on your study permit that are written physically on there. But there are other conditions that are not written on the study permit, but you are expected to know and to follow. And the first one is that while you're here in Canada, you must be actively pursuing your studies. What that means is that IRCC is looking at international students and expecting that you're always making progress towards the completion of your program. If for whatever reason you stop, whether it's you've decided that you don't want to study anymore or you finish your program early, what happens is you actually lose your status after 90 days from the time that you stopped. So irregardless of what the expiry date is, even if you have a study permit that has an expiry date that's still a year away, from the time that you stop studying, your status will become invalid 90 days following the last day that you studied. So it's really important to know that while you're here in Canada, you do need to be actively pursuing your studies. You do need to be making progress towards the completion of your program. Now, there are two exceptions to that. The first is if you're on a regularly scheduled break, and the second is an authorized leave. A regularly scheduled break is a break that's in the academic calendar for your program at your school. So it's not one that you decide, that you want to take. It has to just be based on the actual academic calendar for your program. And so it's really important to check to say, okay, what's the schedule for my program? And really look to see, is there any breaks? Some programs don't have any breaks, and other programs are following, for example, an undergraduate degree may have 2 semesters of school and then the summer's off. But it's very important to check specifically for your program. The second exception is if you're on an authorized leave. This is a leave that's been approved by your school. And it can be for a variety of reasons. It could be for medical reasons, it could be for family situations, but basically it's a leave that you've spoken to your school about and they have given you a specific authorization to take that time off. Now, while you're here in Canada, your study permit actually does also allow you to work. If you are a full-time student, the current rule today is that if you are a full-time student, you can work part-time, so up to 20 hours a week while you're in your semester, and full-time during any regularly scheduled break. Now, that's today's rule. IRCC announced last month, actually just exactly a month ago, that from November 15th until December 31st of 2023, IRCC is going to lift this cap on the number of hours that eligible students are able to work off campus while their class is in session. And so if you are here, if you are studying, even though you're in your semester, between November 15th, 2022 and December 31st, 2023, you're no longer restricted to the 20-hour per week rule, as long as you either applied for or held approval or held a study permit on October 7th of this year. So what we're seeing right now is a temporary lift of that 20-hour cap. Now, again, this ability to work off campus is restricted to full-time students. The exception to that is if you're in your final semester. So if you're in your last semester of your program and you no longer require a full-time course load in order to complete your program, and so you've only registered as a part-time student, that's fine. You're still able to continue working with the same rules that we've just talked about. But again, that's only for your final semester.
Yeah, I think this is it's a lot to take in. So maybe we can talk about some scenarios for
Sure.
Okay, so I have a study permit, and I have had a study permit for a year. I'm going to be in school until April of next year. Okay, so when can I start working full-time?
You would be able to start working full-time November 15th.
Okay,
So
All right.
next week.
okay. By full-time, is it only 40 hours a week?
There's no cap.
Okay, so I can work 60, 80 hours a week if I wanted to.
You can, but keep in mind, if you're here on a study permit, IRCC is still expecting that you're pursuing your studies, right? And so that you are still making progress towards the completion of your program. If you decide to stop studying altogether and start working full-time, that's not going to work, because you still have to be a full-time student. You still need to be making progress towards your program.
Okay, so can I take off some time? Can I just do 2 courses and then work full-time?
No, you still have to be a full-time student in order for you to be able to work using the study permit.
Okay, so basically, if I'm a full-time student, up until I graduate in April of next year, I can continue working full-time. Okay,
Correct.
so what if after I graduate, after I finish my studies in April, then can I work full-time?
Perfect. So once you've completed your program, once you have received any written confirmation that you've completed the requirements of your program, you're actually no longer considered a student. And so you do have to stop working immediately. So let's go back to your example. If you're doing a program that finishes in April, we look to see when you receive any written confirmation from the school that you've met the requirements of your program. And it's at that time that you're considered to no longer be a student and have to stop working.
Okay, but what if I did a 1-year program and then I want to do another 1-year program in September? Then what happens?
So if you're between your programs, and when you complete your first program, if you've already been accepted into the second program of study, if the break between the 2 programs is less than 150 days, and you already have a study permit or have applied for an extension of your study permit, then you can work full-time between your programs.
Okay, and so I can work full-time if I finish one program in April and I have another program starting in September. When can I work full-time?
So once you have completed your program, again, assuming that you have your acceptance to your second program, because that break between April and September is less than 150 days, you'd be able to work full-time completely between it.
And also until December of next year, basically, under the new policy.
Yeah, assuming you are a full-time student in your second program as well, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if I didn't apply for my study permit before October 7th, none of this, the full-time, I can only work part-time while I'm a full-time student.
Correct, exactly. Yeah. So if you didn't hold a study permit on October 7th, you haven't been approved before October 7th, and you haven't even applied for your study permit before October 7th of 2022, then yes, unfortunately, these temporary measures that IRCC has put in, which allow you to work beyond the 20 hours, don't apply to you.
So can only work 20 hours
Exactly.
while studying, but during the 150 days in between the 2 programs, I can work full-time.
Yeah, so you would basically be subject to the current rules as they stand today, not the new temporary measures that are coming in on November 15th.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to talk about your post-grad work permits. I know you guys, a lot of you guys are studying distance and etc. Let's go through what the rules are for getting your post-grad work permit. Post-grad work permit is essentially what I call the golden ticket. You know, it's very rare for someone to be able to easily get a work permit in Canada. Normally, what happens if someone wants to get a work permit is they have to find an employer who can and is willing to and can offer a job where they can apply for a LMIA, a labor market impact assessment, where they have to show they cannot find a Canadian to do the job. It's a very complicated process, and most employers are not going to be willing or able to do it. So to get an open work permit where you can work for anyone you like in Canada is an opportunity. And you know what the rap song says, you get one opportunity, don't waste it, right? So so because you can only qualify for one postgrad work permit, it's very important that before you actually apply for it, you already have, if your goal is to stay in Canada and get permanent residence, you already know how you're going to possibly qualify for permanent residence, okay? Because the length of the postgrad work permit is very important. If your program is between 8 months to 2 years, you only get a work permit to that length of your program. So if your program is for 1 year, you get a 1-year work permit. If your program is 2 years or more, you get a 3-year work permit, right? So that's a big difference. A lot of times, a person who only has a 1-year work permit may not have enough time to get the work experience they need to qualify for permanent residence. So you might want to think about that. Now you can combine your program. So if you do a 1-year program and then within 2 years of your completion of your first program, you finish another 1-year program, you can add it together. So 1 + 1 = 3, a 3-year work permit at the end, okay? Now, another thing that you guys have to understand about the postgrad work permit is how this distance education is going to figure into it. The normal rule is that it's supposed to be less than 50% of your program for online studies, okay? Because of COVID, there have been some transitional provisions for COVID, and they're quite confusing. In general, I would say if you can be in Canada studying, in-face studying, do it, okay? For those whose programs started between March 2020 and August of 2022, you are able to study online outside of Canada 100% of the time. But if your program started this current semester, September 1st, 2022 to 2023, half your time needs to be in Canada, and which is going to be basically, moving forward, that's what it's going to be. The government does say that people who are studying online until August 2023, if your program is online because of COVID only, okay, then you can still do it online. But they certainly encourage you to be in person. Starting August 2023, everything is going to go back to the normal provisions, which is supposed to be that your distance education program is going to be less than 50% of your program.
Okay, Elizabeth, I think.
Sorry. Yeah, I think we're going
to. Oh, no,
to.
what I was going to say is I think it might be helpful just to go through some examples,
sure.
right? Just for
Yeah.
this wonderfully confusing policy that RCC's put in. So if someone starts their program, let's say in September of 2020, okay, they do a 3-year program, they're outside of Canada for 100% of the program, are they still going to be eligible for the postgrad work permit?
Yes, you can be eligible for the postgrad as long as you have a study permit as well, okay? I mean, you should, it's best if you can be in Canada in face, but technically speaking, according to the program, it can be 100% outside of Canada. If your program started before September 1st of this year.
So if someone's program started September 5th of this year, and they've started the program outside of Canada, they're doing a 2-year program that started September 5th of 2022, can they do 100% of the program outside of Canada?
No, if you've started September of this year, then basically you need to be in Canada at least 50% of your program.
Okay. And someone who is already in Canada, but is studying or is doing their complete program online, and they've started the program, let's say September 5th, 2022, can they do their whole program online?
You can only do your online until August of next year, August 31st of 2023, inside Canada online. And the programs are supposed to be online because of COVID. In general, you should be in person if you're in Canada, if your program is able to be in person and it's not online because of COVID.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about maintaining your full-time status. That's another issue for postgrad work permit that we're seeing a lot, is that people tend to sometimes you're having some difficulties and you say, okay, you know what, I'll just drop, a couple of courses that'll help me with my grades afterwards. This could be a very, very big issue when you want to apply for your postgrad work permit, because the provisions of the postgrad work permit requires that the student maintain full-time status for all of the semesters except the last semester. They do recognize sometimes, the way that the schedules work, you can only do, there's maybe one course left over, you need that to complete, that's okay. But every other semester is supposed to be full-time status. And so, if you don't maintain that full-time status, then in the end, after all of this studying, you may not be able to get that golden ticket and apply for the postgrad work permit. So what I do tell clients when they come to me and they say, you know what, Elizabeth, I just can't do the full time this semester, I would normally say, take that semester off, go to your school before you take it off, ask for what's called authorized leave. For example, if you're having some mental health issues or you have a family member that's sick or something, ask for authorized leave. You can get authorized leave for one semester, and then you can take that semester off and then come back and become a full-time student again. Okay. Now, let's talk about when you should be applying for your postgrad work permit. So let's say you say, you know what, I'm ready to apply for my postgrad work permit. I've completed my studies. I know what I'm going to do. When should I apply for the postgrad work permit? So the deadline that I'm going to tell you is different from what you might see on the IRCC website. The IRCC website tells you have 180 days after you've completed your studies to apply for your postgrad work permit. That's true up to a point, but it's not advisable. The reason why it's not advisable is because after 90 days of you completing your studies, irrespective of when your study permit expires, you actually lose your student status. So the postgrad work permit, you have to apply while you have student status in order to qualify. So if you are applying after the 90 days, you can apply, but you have to apply for restoration of status. The other thing is the law allows you to work while waiting for your postgrad work permit as long as you have a study permit when you apply for your postgrad work permit. And so if your status as a student expires, then you won't be able to work while waiting for your work permit. So the deadline is 90 days after you first receive notice that you completed your program. It's not when you get your diploma, your degree. It's after you first receive notice from the school that you've completed your program. When you get your transcript or when you get some sort of notification, you start counting from that day. You count 90 days. Also, make sure that your study permit has not expired. You have to apply before your study permit expires and within 90 days, and then you can work while you're waiting for your work permit. Okay, let's talk about permanent residence. The first system I'm going to talk to you guys about is Express Entry. I'm going to just in general talk about the system. There's going to be new changes coming up next year, so we'll be emailing you changes to the system when they come about next year. But in general, this is how Express Entry works. First, you need to create an online profile. And you can create an online profile if you qualify under one of three categories: the skilled worker category, Canadian experience class, or federal skilled trades class. Once you create an online profile, you can enter the pool. But let me make sure you guys understand the terminology. When you put yourself into the pool, you have not applied for permanent residence yet. Okay, when you're in the pool, you're just a candidate. You don't have the ability to apply for permanent residence. When you enter the pool, you'll get a series of points based on your background and whether or not you have provincial nomination. And every 2 weeks or so, the government has a draw where they issue invitations to apply based on a person's points, and soon to come other factors as well. They have before been, especially during COVID, been looking at which category you qualified under. For example, for a long time, last year, 2021, they were only issuing it for Canadian experience class people and people who had provincial nomination. So now, right now, they've been issuing it for everyone who's in the pool. So if you get an invitation to apply, that is only when you can actually submit your application. Okay. So let's first talk about how to get into the pool. There are three different categories. The first category, the federal skilled worker class, many of you may already qualify. And you say, how do I qualify if I haven't worked in Canada? It's because this category does not require you to work in Canada. The work experience that it requires is that you have 1 year of full-time high-skilled work experience in one occupation. It could be in Canada or outside of Canada. It could be self-employed work, and it could be while you're studying, okay? Then they take a look at your language scores, your education, family. You need to have some financial savings for this, and you need to meet a minimum score of 67. If you do, you can put yourself into the pool. Just because you go into the pool, that doesn't mean that you'll have enough points to be invited to apply. But, we have been able to put people into the pool who have never even been in Canada before under this category. The Canadian experience class is the more well-known category, and it's for people who have at least 1 year of high-skilled work experience in Canada when you're not a full-time student. And you do have to be an employee in Canada as well, okay? And so if you have this work experience, then, and this one doesn't have to be continuous. The federal skilled work experience need at least 1 year continuous. This one does not have to be continuous. It does not have to be in one occupation. And it just has to be, you can get it after you're graduated and you're on your postgrad work permit, okay? The third one is skilled trades. I'm not going to go into it too much. It's for people who are mostly in the construction trades or cooks and chefs. Okay, so once you get into the pool, how do you get the points to let you get out of the pool? So the first one is age. Age is a big differential. Once you get to your 30s, every year you get older, you get 5 or 6 points deducted from your score. By the time you get to your 40s, it's a fast slide down, -10, -11. And by the time you're 45, The good news is your points don't go down anymore, but the bad news is you have 0 for your age. Compared to someone in their 20s who have, 110 points or 100 points, that could be a big differential. So not a lot you can do about age except apply sooner, as soon as you can, okay? Education, if you have a 3-year program and another program on top, so 2 programs, that will really make you jump with regard to your points. Language, if you do not have work experience in Canada, we are normally looking at scores of at least 7s in reading, writing, and listening, reading, writing, and speaking, and 8 in listening or IELTS, and 9s in CELPIP. Relevant Canadian work experience, that's the work experience that I explained about for the Canadian experience class, the same factors for the Canadian experience class. Foreign work experience, if you have high skilled work experience outside of Canada, that could also give you points. Spouse, it depends on their education, language, and work experience. That could count for some points. Provincial nominee program. So Zia is going to talk about Ontario's provincial nominee program. You have to understand that there's different kinds of provincial nominee programs. There are some provincial nominee programs that are linked to Express Entry and other programs that are not linked to Express Entry. It's only the ones that are linked to Express Entry that will give you 600 points for Express Entry, which will basically assure that you're going to be invited to apply. Previous study in Canada. So if you studied in Nipissing, if it was in a master's, PhD, or bachelor's, you'll get 30 points. If not, then it's 15 points. Arranged employment, you won't get this if you have a postgrad work permit. This is only for people who have employer-specific work permits or LMIAs. If you have siblings who are Canadians or permanent residents in Canada, you get 15 points for that. And if you are fluent in French, that can also be a game changer as well, okay? Trade certification, that's for people in the skilled trades. So taking a look at all of this, some of you may think that you're going to be in a very good position. Other people, may be a little bit worried. Then there is going to be a new system likely coming in next year where they're going to be selecting not just based on points or category, they may be looking at other factors such as which occupation of work have you been working in, or a myriad of other situations. We'll send out the newsletters on new changes as they come in, but the issue with the Canadian immigration system is we don't have a lot of warning. In general, I would say for now, what you should do is see how you can improve on your factors for this. And if you can't, let's look at some alternatives to the Express Entry system. So for the OIMP Express Entry stream, I'm just going to go into some, remember I talked about how you can get 600 points if you can get a provincial nominee program. Let me just give you some idea about how this system could work in Ontario. What provincial nominee programs are that they are programs where the federal government has made agreements with each province to allow each province to also select people that they want to get permanent residence. So Ontario's provincial nominee program is called the OINP. And they have express entry linked programs and non-express entry linked programs. So to get to qualify for the non-express for the express entry streams, OIMP has a very different system from some of the other provinces. A lot of the other provinces, you apply directly for the program. In Ontario, you cannot apply directly for the program. you have to sit in the pool, in the express entry pool, and sort of wait and see if Ontario likes you, they're interested in you, and they issue you a notification of interest. So there are three kind of categories where they might take an interest in you. The first one, the human capital stream, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and they often look at which occupation you have. So they have indicated that they really need people in the software engineering program, the tech fields. So they have something called tech draws. So if your occupation is in one, has been in one of those selected tech occupations, and your score for your express entry score is above a certain level, you might be receiving a notification of interest. There are other occupations that they sometimes want. In the past, they've looked at people who have job offers. It's been, you know, something that they don't want to really say for sure who they want to issue notifications. You just have to kind of sit in the express entry pool and see if they will issue you a notification of interest. The second one is the French speaking one. So if you are fluent in French, those lucky French speaking people, then you have a bachelor's degree, you may be issued a notification of interest if your score is above a certain level. And then skilled trades. So these are people who are in the construction trades. And if you have worked in Ontario for at least 1 year in one of these trades, then you could also receive a notification of interest as well.
Okay, so let's take a look. Some of you may be looking at this and saying, you know what, express entry doesn't work for me. I need a different route. The points are just, you know, they're not weighted in my favor. Well, let's take a look at some of Ontario's non-express entry streams. Okay, so Ontario, Elizabeth has gone over Ontario streams that work in tandem, work with the express entry system. Ontario also has a number of streams that are considered the non-express entry streams. Now, with all of these non-express entry streams, Ontario actually implemented an expression of interest system last year. And so what this means is that applicants who meet the minimum eligibility criteria for any of the non-express entry streams, what you first have to do is create a profile and go into Ontario's pool for that specific stream. So what's really different here for comparing the Ontario system is that when you're creating a profile, you're identifying which pool you're interested in going into, so which pool you're eligible for. So Ontario doesn't put everybody into the same pool. They create different pools for each of the non-express entry streams. And we'll talk about the different streams in a moment. Now, when you go into a pool, there's actually the way that the points are allocated and the criteria that are considered is dependent on the category that you're applying through, on the stream that you're applying through. So Ontario has, like I said, a bunch of different programs. We have ones for master's graduates, PhD graduates. We'll go through all the different streams, but the specific criteria that Ontario uses in each of these pools varies depending on the category. So when we look at what Ontario may consider, they look at Canadian work experience, they look at your language proficiency, your location of job offer or study. They can look at, if you have a job offer, they can look at the particulars of that. So your salary, the occupation that it falls under. If you've studied in Canada, then the field of study, the location that you've studied in. These are all the potential different criteria that Ontario can apply. Now, again, depending on the program that you're applying through for Ontario, they change which of these criteria apply. So if you look on the slide, we can see here for the master's or PhD stream, Ontario will look at your Canadian work experience, the area, the field that you've studied in, your language proficiency, the location that you've studied in, and they also have an ability to create what's called strategic priorities point system. And so that's basically where they have a priority that they want to be able to, whether that's an occupation, whether that's an area of work, for example, they can allocate additional points under the strategic priority section. So what you do need to know here is that your points, the way that they're scored, the way that you're given an overall score is dependent on the category that you're applying through. Now, with this EOI system, Ontario is doing several draws throughout the year, but we do not have announcements beforehand as to when a draw is going to happen. Basically, what Ontario does is they complete the draw, and then afterwards they post their criteria for that particular draw on their website. And so what this really means, what the advice here is that if you do qualify, you want to create your profile and go into the expression of interest system as soon as possible, because you never know when Ontario will do a draw and whether or not that would meet your points. With any of the provincial nominee programs, every province only has a certain number of nominations that they can issue every year. And so, you do want to make sure you're applying as soon as possible, or you're in the pool as soon as possible, so that you're able to benefit from these programs. Now, let's take a look at the different streams. So the first two that I want to go through are the master's and PhD streams. So this is for individuals who have completed their master's or their PhD programs here in Ontario. Now, with these two streams, you don't need a job offer. You are able to apply as soon as you have completed the requirements for either your master's or your PhD program. And in terms of timeline, you have up until 2 years of your graduation to qualify and apply through these programs. Now, very important with both of these streams, Ontario is looking for individuals that are ready to enter the labor market. So someone who is not looking to complete any further studies, at least immediately at the time that they're applying, right? So for example, if you've completed your master's program, you're now thinking about doing your PhD program. If you start your PhD, then you would not be eligible at the current time to apply through the master's stream. Now, if you decide that you want to do your PhD 5 years down the road, for example, that's not a problem for applying through the master's stream today. Now, like we just talked about with both of these, the master's and PhD streams, you do have to go through the EOI system, the expression of interest system. The other major streams that fall under the non-express entry routes are the employer-based streams. With the employer-based streams, there are 3 different employer-based streams, and we'll talk about the criteria in a moment for each of these. But when we talk about the employer-based programs, there's requirements on the employer, so the company that's supporting the application, on the position that you're being offered, and on you as the applicant. So let's first take a look at the employer requirements, because this is the same through all 3 of the different employer-based streams. For the company that is supporting your application through this Ontario program, they do have to have been in business for at least 3 years okay? So you are looking for a company that has been established for at least 3 years. Now, if the employer is located inside of the Greater Toronto Area, then they need to have grossed at least $1 million in the past fiscal year, and they need to have at least 5 full-time employees that are either Canadian citizens or permanent residents at the time of your application. If the company is located outside of the GTA, those numbers decrease. So for a company out of Toronto, the gross income that they have to be able to demonstrate in the past fiscal year is $500,000. And at the time of your application, they only need to be able to show 3 full-time employees that are either Canadian citizens or permanent residents. Now, again, regardless of whether you're going any of the employer-based streams, you always do need to have a full-time and a permanent position, okay? When we talk about permanent, it does need to be a position with no end date. So it's an indeterminate contract that you're working on. So let's take a look at the different employer-based streams. Now, when we look at these streams, like I said, there's requirements on the employer, so the company, on the position, and on the applicant. And it's really the differences between the applicant's eligibility criteria when we're looking at these different programs. So the first employer-based stream that we're going to talk about is the international student stream. So this is for someone who has completed an eligible program in Ontario, and they are applying within 2 years of their graduation. Now, when we talk about an eligible program, we're talking about a program that's at least 2 years in length, or it's a 1-year program that requires either a degree as the prerequisite in order to be eligible and to be admitted into that program. If that 1-year program, if we look at the eligibility criteria or the admission criteria for that 1-year postgraduate program, and it says that students are eligible if they've done a degree or a diploma, then that program unfortunately would not, that 1-year program would not be eligible to qualify you under the international student stream. Now, with that being said, Ontario, and Elizabeth can also speak to this as well, but Ontario is talking about changing that requirement, right? To bring in, to I guess make it a little bit more inclusive in terms of which programs would qualify for this international student stream. So stay tuned, like Elizabeth's been talking about today. Any changes that do happen, we do send it out through the newsletter. And so once we do hear more about that from Ontario, once that is actually implemented, then we will send out a newsletter on that as well. Now, with the international student stream, you do need to have a job that is high skilled. And in terms of salary requirements, it needs to meet an entry-level wage for that occupation. But what's really important here is that we don't see any requirements in terms of work experience. And so what this means is that as soon as you complete your program of study and you have that full-time, permanent, high-skilled job offer, you could potentially be eligible to start your PR process through this international student stream of OINP. So something to keep in mind. The next stream is the skilled worker stream. Now, very important here with the skilled worker stream, one of the main requirements is that you need to have at least 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years. And that work experience, that 2 years of work experience has to be in the same occupation as your job offer, right? So the job offer has to be high skilled, and you need to be able to show that you have 2 years in that same occupation that you're working in Ontario. In terms of the wage requirements, it has to meet the median wage, the prevailing wage for your occupation in Ontario. And so with the international student stream, we saw that it needed to meet the entry level. Here, the skilled worker stream, that wage requirement's a bit higher. It's at the median level wage. The last stream with the employer-based streams is the in-demand stream. Now, with the in-demand stream, what Ontario has done is that they have a list of occupations that qualify for the in-demand stream. And very importantly here, this is the one stream we see that includes occupations that are considered low skilled. So your job that you're working in, the job that you've been offered, needs to be on the list of occupations that Ontario has published. And you also have to have at least 9 months of work experience in Ontario in that particular occupation. Now, the work experience doesn't necessarily have to be with your current employer, the employer you're using for supporting your OINP application, but that work experience, that 9 months does have to be in Ontario. It does have to be legal work experience. In terms of the wage requirements here, again, we're looking at a median wage that has to be offered to you. Now, really importantly, when we're talking about all these different streams, when you're coming here as international students, when you're coming to study, Elizabeth alluded to this earlier as well, you want to think about when you're able to apply for your permanent residence. And if you're coming here with a spouse, if you're coming here, the both of you together, you may be that one of you is here studying, one of you is here working. The other one who's working right now may be able to apply for permanent residence, may be able to qualify and apply for permanent residence while you're still here as a student. And so it's really important to sit down and go through these options and go through the different programs that are available as early as you can.
Okay, so we have one more category to talk with you guys about, and that's the RNEP program. You guys are in a very good situation where you've picked a good university to go to, not only because of the quality of its academics, but because of the situation. So, you know, first of all, you're in a province outside of Quebec, which is good because all of these programs are express entry, and, you know, this does not apply to anyone who wants to live in Quebec. Okay, so you're outside there. You've also picked a place in Ontario that is outside of the Greater Toronto area. Fantastic. You can, you know, take advantage of a lot of the programs that Zia was talking about with regard to the OINP. And now finally, the community that you've picked is the right one. So North Bay is one of the only one of a handful of communities that get to participate in the RNEP program. And what it would require in order to apply for permanent residence, and this program is pretty fast. You can get permanent residence in around a year or so. What happens is first, you need to be recommended from a participating community such as North Bay, okay? And in order to be eligible, you need to have either 1 year of work experience in the last 3 years, or you've graduated from an eligible study program. So the study program needs to be either a 2-year program where you have 18 months in the community. Remember when I first told you guys about trying to, you know, study in the community? One of the reasons is it's not just whether or not you can qualify for the postgrad work permit. There's also a lot of other things pertaining to permanent residence that will require you to do so. For example, this is one of the situations, okay? So if you are doing either a 2-year program, or if you are a master's or PhD student, it could be less than 2 years. You could do a 1-year master's and still qualify. You need to have, this is very key, a qualifying job offer in the community, okay? And that should be a permanent job offer as well. If you can do that, if you can also meet the language benchmark as well. Okay, most of you, if you're already going to Nipissing, you shouldn't have any issues passing the language. Either you're working in Canada or you have settlement funds, and yeah, that's about it. Okay, so so for the RNEP program, if you can get the qualifying job offer in the community and you qualify under with this other situations, and very importantly, you can get a recommendation from the participating community. This is a very good program to apply through as well. All right, so we talked a lot about different programs, and you know, there's a lot of information for you to take in. So let's talk about some practical steps that you guys should do for yourself.
I think the first one really is to, you know, and I've talked about this a little bit earlier, but have a plan. Know what it is that you need to do to meet your immigration goals. So if that's to apply for permanent residence, you know, start early in terms of identifying how you could potentially qualify, what your plan is, and what you need to do in order to be able to apply for your permanent residence. It's never really too early to start. And like I mentioned earlier as well, you never know. It may be helpful to sit down with an immigration professional, with a lawyer who can go through your background and really identify for you specifically how you particularly can qualify, how your family can qualify for permanent residence, and what those programs are that would be easiest for you to apply for your permanent residence.
So it starts off the plan. And by the way, don't just go and ask your friend what you should do, okay? immigration laws vary dramatically. They change all of the time. And every different person has a different situation. Your friend may qualify for something you might not. You might qualify for something your friend might not. Okay. Don't ask your friend. You have to seek a professional lawyer, not consultant. I'm very biased against consultants. They don't go to law school. And there's not a lot of oversight. I strongly recommend you go to an immigration lawyer who understands immigration law, who has practiced immigration law. And so once you do have your plan, you need to do what you need to do to get there. Okay, it takes some determination for you to say, okay, well, this is my number one priority. Now that I have my plan, okay, let's carry it out, right? Go and study and practice those exams for your IELTS, right? Look at your study program. Is this what you need to do in order to get your postgrad work permit, in order to get PR? And make sure you have enough on your time on your work permit. If you have a 1-year work permit, are you going to find a job right away? If not, will you be able to get the 1-year work experience that you need? Do you need the 1-year work experience? Okay.
Talked about this right from the start of this presentation today, but make sure that you stay in status. So while you're here in Canada, it is really important that you keep your temporary status. If you lose it, if you don't follow, what we've talked about today, that can be very problematic for your later goal of applying for permanent residence, right? So while you're here, make sure you keep your status, apply, be aware of what your expiry date is, make sure you're applying for that extension properly and on time. And really importantly, don't misrepresent. We get a lot of people, and misrepresentation is anything that, is incorrect on your application. And it doesn't have to be intentional. We have a number of people that'll come to us and say, oh, well, we just didn't know what the law was and we did it on our own. So for example, we didn't know who a spouse was. And so we've listed ourselves as single on an application, but really we had a common law spouse. It's really important to ensure that your applications are complete, that you know the law and that you're not misrepresenting yourself when you're submitting your applications.
And if you're hiring someone else to help you, they maybe like we help our clients with the forms, but we always send it to them to check. Make sure you're checking and make sure you're reviewing all of your forms properly, right? And in detail, because the only person who really knows if the information is correct is yourself. So make sure that you are the ones who, when you're signing off on your forms, don't ever sign anything that you don't read, okay? Finally, if your application is rejected, contact a lawyer right away, not a consultant, a lawyer, okay? Because only lawyers can go to federal courts, and there's very specific dates, deadlines for federal court. If your decision is made inside Canada, you only have 15 days to go and file a notice to federal courts. Outside of Canada is 60 days, okay, from the dates that the rejection is made. Okay, and you can only and also, sometimes call centers, right? People there, if you eventually get someone, may be very nice, but they are not necessarily on your side, and they also provide erroneous information a lot of the times. So for example, if you call the call center, you tell them, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't, they might say, okay, why don't you write a note, or okay, I'll send a note in for you. That is considered a reconsideration, and you will only have one chance of reconsideration. So if let's say the call center agent put something in and they say, no, we don't want to give this to you, then you come to me and you say, Elizabeth, now what can I do? I cannot file another reconsideration for you. Okay, they won't take a look at it. So make sure you go to a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, right away once your application is rejected. So we can make a proper decision on whether or not to go to federal court or ask for a reconsideration and file it properly. Also, your time is of the essence. If you've, for example, applied for a postgrad work permit and was rejected, you only have a certain period of time to file the postgrad work permit. Otherwise, if you're out of time, then you could be out of status, or you may need to redo your studies again in order to qualify. Okay, so we've come to the end of our presentation. Here's our contact information. If you ever have any questions, you can book a consultation with us. And we always offer students who come to our webinars a discounted rate. It's only $100 for a consultation. We'll go over your situation and create a plan for you. Okay, just let us know that you've been to the webinar. Okay. Let's go through some questions. We have like 15 minutes to do that. Okay, so put your Q&As in your questions in the Q&A button and we'll start answering. Okay, so we have someone who had a question regarding summer school. If they take a couple courses during the scheduled break in the summer, is that a part-time student? Are they able to do that? Can they work 20 hours a week if they study during the scheduled break? What do you think about that, Zia?
Yeah, so right now, if we're talking about the current rules as they are today, not looking at the changes that are coming up, but talking about the current rules as they are today, if the summer semester is a scheduled break and you decide to take some courses to get ahead, for example, which makes you a part-time student, that's fine. It does not change your ability to work full-time while you are a part-time student, okay? Because that is, as long as that semester is considered a scheduled break in your program, you're not required to take courses during that period. And so if you decide to still take them, that doesn't change your ability to work off campus or to work full time during that period. Now, with the new changes that are coming up next week, again, the summer semester would still remain the same because it is still a scheduled break. Again, you don't have to be registered as a full-time student. You can be part-time and still be working full-time.
Okay, great.
The next question here, Elizabeth, how early can I arrive in Canada before my studies?
So that's a good question. I think the answer should be more with regard to a consideration of the CBSA officer at the airport. Oftentimes, CBSA officers, they want to know your purpose to come to Canada. If you come within a reasonable time, let's say a month or maybe a little bit longer, maybe 1 to 2 months, you say, well, I'm here, I'm going to start studying, I need to look for housing, the officer will be, I think that's reasonable and they shouldn't have any issues letting you in. If you want to come in 6 months earlier, the officer may question you and say, well, what are you going to be doing in Canada for 6 months before you start studying, right? You cannot work until you start your studies. So you're not going to be able to do much as a visitor. You basically will be visiting Canada. You can't work, you can't study. And so the officer oftentimes will have some issues allowing you in too early because they may be afraid that you're going to be working illegally, before you start your studies. Okay. Okay. What if a student wants to move to another province after they complete this studies? What are the steps?
Yeah, I mean, the postgrad work permit that Elizabeth has spoken about, that's an open work permit. And so what that means is that you can use it to work anywhere in Canada in almost any position. And so there's not really much from an immigration point of view if you're looking to get the postgrad work permit, move to a different province and start working there.
Yeah, you just need to understand that every province, like we've talked a lot about the Ontario OIMP because this is where you guys are. But every province has their own provincial nominee programs. So most of the provincial nominee programs will want you to have a job there. So it's not just enough for you to move to another province for you to qualify for, permanent residence under the provincial nominee programs. But there's nothing right now preventing you from under immigration law from going to another province. It's not illegal for you to move to another province. Yeah,
If someone has been rejected twice, what can be done?
well, we'll first of all need to look at the reasons for your rejection. Normally, when someone comes to me and they've had a rejection, we will need to look at the notes in their case to look at the reasons for rejection. We may be filing a notice to federal court if we are within the timelines. So if you've been rejected, you can contact us, contact another immigration lawyer, but contact someone as soon as possible. What's the difference between a full-time and part-time summer school student?
Well, when you're trying to determine what's part-time and what's full-time in terms of your studies, that's really a definition for the school. So IRCC doesn't prescribe that for all students at a federal level. They defer to the schools to determine who is full-time and who is part-time. Again, it does come back also to your school's academic calendar for your particular program. If the summer semester is a scheduled break for you, then it doesn't matter whether you're registered as a full-time or a part-time student for that semester. If the summer semester is actually a semester that you're supposed to be studying, so for example, if you're doing a master's program that's a year straight with no scheduled breaks, then you do want to make sure that you are a full-time student in order to qualify for the postgrad work permit, like Elizabeth talked about earlier. Elizabeth, so a question here. I applied for my visa application on October 8th. Am I eligible to work more than 20 hours of work a week?
Oh, shoot. Unfortunately, no. If you've applied after October 7th, when the minister made the announcement, then you are subject to the normal rules for students, which is while you are a full-time student and studying in classes, that's limited to 20 hours a week. After you've, if you're on scheduled break, you can work full-time. Okay, guys, that's it for us. Thank you so much for listening and for your great questions. And yeah, thank you, Laura, for inviting us.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Sia. Such an important session and great information for everybody. Thank you again.
Thank
Okay,
you.
our pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.